Ukrainian forces are holding their positions in the center of Pokrovsk despite attempts by Russian occupiers to gain a foothold in the city. This was reported by the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces. The soldiers note that the defense forces are holding back the enemy and conducting search and strike operations to eliminate them. In particular, the fighters have already carried out a sweep in the area of the railway station.
This made it possible to block Russian attempts to amass forces, which they are unsuccessfully making in order to increase pressure on the northern part of the city. Every time the enemy tries to cross the railway into the northern part of the city, they suffer maximum losses. Overall, since the beginning of November, Ukrainian forces have eliminated 388 Russian occupiers in Pokrovsk. Another 87 were wounded. And a message from the 7th Rapid Response Corps of the Air Assault Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces on Telegram.
The Russian army continues active assaults in the Pokrovsk and Kostiantynivka directions. Almost half of all battles since the start of the day have taken place in these sectors of the front. According to the General Staff of the Ukrainian Armed Forces, a total of 117 have been recorded. Which Russian targets have been hit by the Special Operations Forces, and what number does the counter of Russian military losses show now? Find out next.
Ukrainian troops continue to hold back the Russian advance in the Pokrovsk direction. Since the beginning of the day, Russian forces have attempted 42 times to advance toward Ukrainian positions near 12 settlements.
There's a lot of work to do. We support the infantry, fire at targets, and lay mines at intersections. But mostly, the targets are the positions of Russian drone operators. Because all these drone pilots are flying around, it's a nightmare.
And the Special Operations Forces of the Ukrainian Armed Forces reported on the targets of a series of precision drone strikes against Russian army positions. They destroyed key strongpoints and concentrations of enemy personnel in the direction of the Pokrovsk-Mirnorad agglomeration. In particular, in Solntsevka, Dokuchaevsk, Rybinsk, and Shakove in the Donetsk region, Ukrainian fighters burned ammunition depots and also destroyed locations where Russian assault troops were concentrated.
Directly in the city of Pokrovsk itself, an important Russian position was destroyed which had given them a significant tactical advantage on the battlefield. The elevated position at the industrial facility was used by enemy snipers who kept a large area of territory under fire control. This building also served as a gathering point for enemy personnel. In the
south of Ukraine, the occupying forces are trying to advance in the area of Hulyai in the Zaporizhzhia region. However, according to analysts, all Russian reports about supposed breakthroughs and securing positions on the outskirts of the city are nothing more than yet another set of imaginary victories by propagandists.
The point is that, once again, they desperately need to divert attention from their failures in the Pokrovsk direction by trying to create an information pretext for allegedly successful actions, this time in the Zaporizhzhia direction. The change in weather conditions has allowed Ukraine's defense forces to use drone tactics in real time to counter the assault formations of the Russian occupiers. There has been no further advance, let alone any breakthrough into Ukrainian defenses in the Hulyai area as claimed by the Russian occupiers.
Since the beginning of the day, the Russian army has attempted to break through Ukrainian defenses along the entire front line 117 times, according to calculations by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. In the Oleksandrivka direction, Ukrainian defenders repelled 12 Russian attacks. Another 6 enemy assaults were stopped on the Lyman section of the front. Soldiers from the 93rd Separate Mechanized Brigade, Kolodny Yar, are speaking about yet another military fiasco for the Russians on the Kostiantynivka bridgehead. They successfully repelled the invaders' armored assault and inflicted significant losses on the occupiers' personnel. Since the beginning of the day, there have been a total of 24 battles on the Kostiantynivka section of the front.
There have already been 3 attempts to capture the city in the Kostiantynivka direction, but for 10 days we carried out counterattacks, destroyed the enemy, pushed them back, and as a result they failed to establish a bridgehead for further advances from Kostiantynivka toward Kramatorsk. This is also a major and important task for us, to prevent the encirclement and capture of the city, so that the enemy cannot carry out their plan to seize the entire Donetsk region.
The losses of the Russian army have exceeded 1,165,000 soldiers since the start of the full-scale invasion. These figures were announced by the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. Just in the past 24 hours, the defense forces eliminated 920 occupiers and also destroyed 2 tanks, 8 armored vehicles, more than 26 artillery systems, and 2 multiple rocket launchers. The Russian army will also be short nearly 1,000 drones and 80 units of automotive equipment. In
less than 11 months of this year, Russia has lost more artillery systems than in the entire previous year. This statistic was announced by the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine. As of today, the Ukrainian armed forces have destroyed 13,053 units of Russian artillery, and the total losses of the Russian army since the start of the full-scale invasion amount to 34,585 systems. The mortar crews of the Skiff Brigade of the National Guard of Ukraine are currently defending the borders of Kharkiv region. They are serving on one of the hottest sections of the front, striking the invaders with quick and accurate shots. Our next story is about two experienced mortar crew fighters with the call signs Step and Karamba, who shared the intricacies of their work.
This video shows the work of the mortar crew guardsmen in the Serebryansky forest in the fall of 2023. Their task was to help the infantry advance and suppress enemy firing positions, says Senior Sergeant with the call sign Step.
When aerial reconnaissance provides us with important information indicating that there are enemy forces located at specific targets, we quickly take careful aim, open fire, and successfully hit those targets.
Step, a 30-year-old guardsman, worked in the Czech Republic before Russia's full-scale invasion. But in February 2022, when the enemy invaded Ukraine, he decided to drop everything and volunteered to join the National Guard. He had to learn how to operate a mortar from scratch.
General, there are no military secrets there. In general, there are no military secrets there. The main thing is the desire. You have to listen and learn, and everything will come, everything will be fine. The most important thing is to have the desire to defend your homeland, your home, your family. They tell me the numbers on the site affect the firing range, so they say, set the numbers closer or farther, and I adjust the settings I need.
Junior Sergeant with the call sign Karambo is aiming the M74 mortar at the target. This weapon does not tolerate mistakes, so a lot depends on the coordinated work of the scouts, spotters, and gunners.
Accuracy has always been a necessary criterion.
Accuracy has always been a necessary criterion, so we constantly carry out calibration. We calibrate whenever possible. We make adjustments on the compass.
Kharkiv has set it up.
Karamba and Step serve in different mortar crews, but together, as part of the Skiff National Guard Brigade, they liberated Balaklia and Izium, fought near Kupiansk, spent several rotations in the Serebryansky forest and Klishchivka, and for a year now have been defending their native Kharkiv. They say they were really happy when they found out they were being transferred from Donbass to the Kharkiv direction. It
was very good news that, being close to home, if you have leave or a free moment, you have the chance to drop by home. Although that happens quite rarely, it does happen.
Karamba and Stepa's comrades are already waiting for them on the front line, so very soon they will head out to defend the borders of Kharkiv region and once again prepare their weapons for battle. Stable, reliable, and consistent.
Support for Ukraine in its fight against Russian aggression has been reaffirmed by the countries of Northern Europe and the Baltics. This was stated in a joint declaration by the leaders of the Northern Baltic 8. The day before, they held telephone talks with President Volodymyr Zelensky and emphasized that Europe's security directly depends on Ukraine. From the very beginning of Russia's aggressive war, we have stood by Ukraine and will continue to do so. Ukraine is showing that it takes peace seriously. Russia, on the other hand, has still not committed to a ceasefire or taken any steps toward ending the war. We will continue to arm Ukraine and strengthen Europe's defense in order to deter further Russian aggression. Germany has developed the latest Greyshark underwater drones which will protect the Baltic Sea from sabotage. According to the developers, the Shark drones are based on artificial intelligence and are literally packed with advanced technologies. They will monitor the waters of the Baltic Sea, carry out reconnaissance missions, detect enemy units, and protect critical infrastructure. Mass production of the Greyshark could begin as early as next year. The main
advantage of the drones is that they have what is known as stealth capability. They are very difficult to detect. As I mentioned earlier, the drones can also be used for anti-submarine warfare to detect and track enemy submarines. I should note that the capabilities of underwater drones are rapidly developing and expanding.
The main round of the US-Ukrainian meeting in Geneva has concluded. US Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated that the White House is making some changes to the peace plan. He added that representatives of the delegations are currently working on Ukraine's proposals. In addition, Rubio called today's meeting the most productive and significant since Donald Trump's team became involved in the peace settlement process for the war.
We have a very good working product based on the opinions of all interested parties. We went through each point one by one, and I think we've made good progress. We are working on some changes and adjustments in the hope of narrowing the differences and moving closer to something that will be beneficial for Ukraine and, obviously, for the United States as well. Ultimately, our presidents will have to approve this. And of course, there is still the Russian side. I think the takeaway from this is as follows. This is a very, very significant meeting, and I would say the best one throughout the entire negotiation process. At the
meeting in Switzerland, in addition to Secretary of State Marco Rubio, the United States was also represented by Army Secretary Dan Driscoll, the President's Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, as well as Donald Trump's son-in-law Jared Kushner. And on the Ukrainian side, the negotiations included the head of the President's office, Andriy Yermak, Secretary of the National Security and Defense Council, Rustem Umerov, as well as representatives from the Ukrainian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, the main intelligence directorate, the Security Service of Ukraine, SBU, and the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine. The purpose of the meeting was to agree on the wording and points of the plan for further negotiations between Volodymyr Zelensky and Donald Trump. The special correspondent of the Freedom TV channel in Europe, Vitaly Sizov, closely followed the events in Geneva. He is now live with the television center and will tell us more about the meeting between the US and Ukrainian delegations. Vitaly, good evening. We are waiting for you to share the details of the diplomatic contacts in Switzerland. What new details about the negotiations have you managed to find out? I can say that the meeting has formally ended, but there are still many journalists here who are waiting, perhaps, for an additional statement from the US representative Mark Ruby and the Ukrainian representative Andriy Yermak. The day was particularly intense, and the important meeting actually started a few hours later than expected, but nevertheless, according to the Ukrainian delegation, the outcome was very positive. And the head of the Ukrainian delegation, Andriy Yermak, said that significant progress was achieved at this meeting.
Well, let me see. We
have made very good progress and are moving forward toward a just and lasting peace. The Ukrainian people, more than anyone, deserve this peace and are striving for it. We thank our great friends, the United States, President Trump personally, and his team for their commitment to the cause of peace. A second meeting will take place soon, where we will continue to work on joint proposals with the involvement of our European partners. Final decisions will be made by our presidents.
Let me remind you that when the draft of this agreement was published, a number of European leaders had comments on it, but nevertheless they stated that they would take it as a basis and work with it. And as we can see from Andriy Yermak's comments, the proposals put forward by the European Union are indeed shaped by Ukraine based on how they see Ukraine's security and the future of security in the European region. The United States of America is ready to consider them. Just a few hours before the meeting, the President of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, shared her vision of this agreement. She named 3 principles that are very important for the European Union in this agreement.
First, borders cannot be changed by force. Second, Ukraine is a sovereign state, and there can be no restrictions on its armed forces that could make the country vulnerable to future attacks and thereby undermine European security. Third, it is necessary to fully reflect the central role of the European Union in ensuring peace in Ukraine. Ukraine must have the freedom and sovereign right to choose its own destiny.
By choosing its own destiny, Ursula von der Leyen is primarily referring to European integration, specifically integrating Ukraine into the common economic space of the European Union as quickly as possible, making Ukraine part of the EU's defense system, and in the long term making Ukraine a member of the European Union so that Russia cannot hinder this in any way. The President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, also commented on the interim results of these negotiations. And although we do not yet know all the exact details, what points were changed and to what extent, The President of Ukraine responded very positively to the course of the negotiations and expressed his gratitude to the United States of America for its participation in the peace process.
The complexity of the entire diplomatic situation lies in the fact that it was Russia that started this war, and only Russia. And throughout the entire full-scale war, it has been Russia. And only Russia does not want to end the war. That is why we value so much the fact that so many forces and leaders are now working for the sake of peace. Ukraine is grateful to the United States, to every American heart, and personally to President Trump for the assistance that, starting with the javelins, has saved Ukrainian lives. We thank everyone in Europe, in the G7 and G20 groups, who helps us defend life. It is important to maintain this support. Volodymyr Zelensky, President of Ukraine, on Telegram.
Volodymyr Zelensky has repeatedly emphasized who is to blame for igniting this war. This is very important because Russia is now doing everything it can to portray the European Union and Ukraine as the ones who want war, even though it is obvious who the real aggressor is. But it is necessary to keep repeating this. It is also important for Ukraine to actively participate in developing the proposals of the United States of America, because Moscow always uses any objections or misunderstandings among the allies as an excuse to once again accuse the European Union and Ukraine of being unwilling to engage in substantive negotiations. Well, in reality, we understand that Ukraine is ready for dialogue. It has formulated its proposals and is waiting to see how Washington will respond and to what extent they are willing to include them in the text of the final agreement. Then we continue to work here in Geneva and are possibly waiting for a joint statement from Mark Rubio and Andriy Yermak. If it takes place, we will inform you about its content. Back to the studio. Vitaly?
Thank you for the detailed information. We were joined live by Vitaly Sizov, special correspondent for the Freedom Channel in Europe. He spoke about the results of the meeting between the Ukrainian and US delegations in Geneva.